Do I look like I'm dead? One seemingly inconsequential day, I found myself nearly inconsolable, sobbing over the thought of one day having to witness my own mother's death. The awareness to not just the probability of, but the guarantee of the death of everyone around me was too much to bear. But my fear being specifically directed at my mother's mortality was symbolic of a greater fear. Our parents are our protectors. They guide us and seem to have all the answers. But how can she possibly protect me if she cannot protect herself? If she has to die, then so must I. The reality of the human condition would find its way back into the forefront of my mind periodically over the course of a few months, reducing me to tears if I thought about it an instant too long. It became such a problem that I had to buy a book called Overcoming the Terror of Death, and me and my boss would laugh about our daily death talks. After a lot of reflection, I was able to write what I call my death essay, in which the final sentence reads, "I am grateful for death." How did my relationship go from one extreme to another? And why does my life feel more fulfilling now than it did before? We're all gonna die, yet we all cope differently. Some suppress the knowledge and get caught up in the rat race of life, convinced that there's a piece of cheese at the end of the wheel, when in reality, it's just more wheel until you die. Others comfort themselves with organized religions. We are born alone, and we die alone, but we don't have to cope alone. I'm going to walk through all of these different coping options, read what the experts have to say, ask for the wisdom of my friends and family, and most importantly, sit here with you as we wade through all of your fears and all of mine. So let's answer the question. When death is all around us, how do we keep on living?
Hello, I'm Olivia.
If you have recently lost a loved one, this video may not be the resource you're looking for. I'm so sorry for your loss. Feel free to stay, but this is less about coping with someone who has already died and more about the conclusions I've come to on how to process the anxiety that everyone, including you, will die. The anxiety that any second your whole world could change and people your life revolve around could cease to exist. It's about tackling that existential dread that persists whether or not someone has died. If that sounds like something you can benefit from, then welcome. Let's get started. Why do we have to die anyway? All forms of evolution are, at a base level, a byproduct of our body's only job, to keep us alive long enough to reproduce. The fear of death is one such evolution. Considering this, you may be wondering why we have not simply just evolved past death. I know many scientists are trying to artificially evolve our species to allow for immortality and resurrection, but why haven't our bodies done this task for us? There's a species of jellyfish that theoretically are immortal. They can turn back the clock of their aging. They can become full adults and then revert their cells back to that of children. But biological immortality is just one side of the coin. To be truly immortal, you have to be invincible. These jellyfish are only theoretically immortal because they're so low on the food chain that they're far more likely to be eaten or crushed before they would see the end of the world and the implosion of the sun. But if humans had this magical ability, they would still not be free from death. Disease and disasters could still overcome us at any moment, despite our position at the top of the food chain. But still, what if? What if someday our bodies or minds could figure out how to make us both immortal and invincible, free from disease, disasters, and most importantly, death? Well, we'd run out of resources. If our planet can hardly handle 7 billion people, imagine how stretched thin our resources would be in just a year's time with no deaths. What a miserable, never-ending existence it would be to always be thirsty and never be full. Let's say we stopped having kids. Unlikely, but technically within our control. This would effectively be the end of evolution as we know it. Not just biologically, but mentally. No more new great thinkers being born to help cure cancer. No more fresh sets of eyes to look at old problems. It could be assumed that within a few hundred years, there would be nothing new to ever discover or learn. We would just simply reach our limit of the minds available to the world. All in all, the rules that this world plays by simply don't allow for the game of life to be played in this way. So much would have to be different that it would simply not be the same Earth anymore. That possibility only exists in a fantasy world with unicorns and fairy godmothers. So now that we're all done stewing over the impossible, we can face things for how they actually are. We are all going to die. We all have to die. It's a big, scary, overwhelming thing to think about. So let's dumb it down. Let's look at it from a perspective so simple even a toddler can understand it. The building blocks of death were outlined in developmental psychology studies where children were interviewed about death. These subcomponents of death are as follows: non-functionality, irreversibility, universality, personal mortality, inevitability, causality, and unpredictability. I will be referencing these terms throughout the video to help us make sense of this topic. The fear of death manifests itself in sneaky ways. All of our stories will look different, leading to varying stressors and phobias, but at the end of each of our lives, we all end up on the same road, the one leading to our inevitable demise. If you look at the bigger picture, your special set of motivations probably aren't that special after all. Death creates problems that may not at first seem directly related to mortality. Death has a long reach with an impact that's often concealed. Though the fear of dying can totally immobilize some people, often the fear is covert and expressed in symptoms that appear to have nothing to do with one's own mortality. Many people have anxiety, depression, and other symptoms that are fueled by the fear of death. Sheldon Solomon, one of the people responsible for coining the terror management theory, says that our subconscious and conscious death anxieties drive a lot of what we do. In other words, our actions exist to manage terror. Death anxiety is most problematic when we suppress it. When we bury it under psychological bushes, it doesn't stay there, Solomon says. Our research has shown it manifests in a variety of unfortunate ways. Everything from hating people who are different to voting for people who say they're uniquely capable of ridding the world of evil, to pissing on the environment, to wanting to buy more stupid stuff. In many cases, acknowledging that we'll die is when our fears make us better people or more grateful for our experiences. There are a few key experiences that serve as a catalyst for this confrontation. I believe one such catalyst in my own life happened over the course of a few years. In the boutique that I work at, I find myself around a lot of senior citizens due to them being our target audience. I often hear about customers who have serious, painful illnesses or whose spouses have passed suddenly. I think it's been good exposure therapy, especially now that I'm aware of its effect on my nervous system. So I can use it to my benefit. It has forced me to face my own mortality at a young age, but it's also given me the gift of enriching my life with said awareness. With that being said, I am at times painfully aware of how impermanent the person's places and things that make up my life are. Everything could be taken away from me and you in an indefinite amount of unthinkable tragedies. Not all deaths are created equal. Death does not care about being fair. It doesn't care about how holy you've been or how healthy you've been. Overall, there are two main ways in which you and everyone around you may be subject to when you leave this earth: old age and unexpected disaster. Old age is obviously everyone's preferred way to go. In my journal, I wrote, "Despite how close I am to my grandma, her death scares me the least. Maybe untimely death is the real fear." Sudden disaster can look like anything from horrendous tragedies caused by natural disasters or the drawn-out knowledge that a young person only has a few months left to live after a devastating diagnosis. In a day and age where everyone carries a camera in their pockets, the potential for casually being exposed to these ruthless, uncaring, and unfair visits from the Grim Reaper is at an all-time high. With that being said, there are also two main lenses in which we can view this through our own eyes or through the eyes of others. Let me explain. When you die, all of your life goals, plans, and day-to-day routines are no more. But that's okay, because there's no more life that needs these things. Death doesn't create an empty life, there's just simply no longer something to contain them. This draws on the causality and non-functionality aspects that we spoke about earlier. When you're no longer here to hold together the things that made your life yours, they drift away. Your belongings must be sold, your job must be filled. At this point in time, the people affected are the friends and family. After all, you're in their pot as well. You are removing things from their pots, leaving empty spots in their lives. These empty spots can be very big if someone dies young or unexpectedly and had based their future around yours. So when you think about your own death, you may see it through the eyes of everyone left behind and fear how people will cope when you're gone, or you can see it through your own eyes and fear what it means to be dead. I'll speak more about what it means to be dead in the religion and spirituality portion of this video. But when you fear others dying, for the most part, you're actually just afraid of them leaving holes in your pot. You see their death through your own eyes. I wrote in my journal, I'm most scared of my fiance dying. If he dies, the holes in my pot would be so big, I worry I would never be able to fill them. And I'd never want to. I'd feel empty, as would my future. But to look at the situation from a glass half full perspective, or should I say, a pot half full perspective, what about all that's left in the pot? Plenty of people have left my life before, even when I didn't want them to, or thought at one point that I didn't want them to. What got me through it was the other people left in my pot. When I've lost friendships, I leaned on other loved ones for support. If my biggest nightmares came true and my fiance passed before me, I would have people to lean on. I would ask other people to take a bigger place in my pot, so it wouldn't be so empty. I suppose the ultimate fear with others dying is synonymous with the fear of being alone. While we must journey to death alone, it's highly unlikely you will ever be on your life journey totally alone. There's obviously a difference between a friend breakup and a death, though, the permanence. This is the irreversibility building block of death. Most of growing up is coming to accept the inevitability of change. It's an earthly truth that nothing is permanent. Trying to resist this impermanence will only bring useless stress, anxiety, and stifle growth. Therefore, permanence feels impossible to perceive. There's no redo, rewind, problem solving, or trying again. Even with each passing moment, there's a death of that present moment. You can never relive it or try again. And that feels very heavy to me. I guess I was wrong. There are two things that are truly permanent: death and the past. But the past feels less permanent because until you die, you could try again in a new present. Make it up to the person you hurt, try something new, learn something from the mistake so that you become a better person. But in death, your chances run out. The book Overcoming the Terror of Death is written by a therapist. He asks one of his patients, "Why is death so terrifying? What specifically is it about death that frightens you?" His patient instantly answered, "All of the things I would not have done." This points to the theme of great importance to many who ponder or face death: the positive correlation between the fear of death and the sense of an unlived life. In other words, the more unlived the life, the greater the death anxiety. The more you fail to experience your life fully, the more you will fear death. But if everything we do seems doomed to oblivion and your chances run out, and the thing that is you ceases to exist, why try at all? Greek philosopher Epicurus believes that because no activity can satisfy our craving for eternal life, all activities are intrinsically unrewarding. He wrote that many individuals develop a hatred for life, even ironically to the point of suicide. Others engage in frantic and aimless activities that have no point other than the avoidance of pain that's inherent in the human condition. Like it or not, Solomon said, we are living, breathing pieces of defecating meat that are no more enduring or significant than lizards or potatoes. If at the end of the day, my life's significance rivals that of a potato, how am I supposed to get up in the morning? Why aren't we constantly paralyzed by existential terror? The way we human beings manage that existential terror is to embrace culturally constructed belief systems that we share with other people. One such culturally constructed system is the rapidly growing wellness industry. During COVID, all of our lives were publicly threatened on a mass scale. We were all stuck at home with no distraction from our fragility. It's no surprise that at the same time, there was a massive surge in popularity of skincare routines. It seems entirely plausible to me that this was a form of control, and we were exacting it over our bodies during a time when we had little control. At its core, most skincare routines are focused on anti-aging at all costs. It's become such a norm that young girls start participating in the anti-aging process, despite being at the peak of their youth. There is little symbolism here. It's very black and white. You get old and you die. If you never look old, you can at least pretend that you'll never die. Additionally, the phrase healthy skin actually has a meaning that's more than skin deep. Health equals life. If you are healthy, you're less likely to die from COVID. So it's only natural that you would be highly motivated to, at the very least, look healthy. Is the whole wellness industry rooted not in health, but in death? Wellness is a 21st century secular belief system that, psychologically speaking, is fundamentally directed at avoiding death anxiety, Solomon said. Because, in part, it's convincing oneself that the right regimen of diet and exercise will either keep you perpetually young, or at the very least, perpetually alive. There's a lot of truth in the power of healthy eating and lifestyle, but many wellness trends often overstep those facts by a lot. The anti-vax movements, the supplements, the false dichotomy of nature versus science, those are just a few examples. And doesn't the rejection of Western medicine make you more eligible for an early death? Perhaps But there's something oh so enticing about a solution. When you rely on true science and scientific evidence, you live with a lot of uncertainty. A lot of things are not understood, and when somebody sells something with a lot of certainty, there's an appeal to that. If there's one constant thing I've noticed among many of the wellness products, it's the element of certainty in their marketing and the way that they're talked about in wellness circles. Taking collagen every day will definitely give you luxurious hair and nails. Drinking kombucha will absolutely improve your microbiome. There's no doubt that apple cider vinegar in the morning will help with digestion. We should strive for lives that are enjoyable, and being well to avoid dying might lead to the opposite. If for every hour of exercise you extend your life by 1 hour, but you hate exercising, then you're spending the extra hour you gain doing something you hate. So what the hell's the point? Sometimes the thing you enjoy might shorten your life a bit, but then you had an enjoyable life. Solomon is lobbying for what he calls the psychological sweet spot. You don't try to banish death anxiety, but you don't become so consumed by it that you're paralyzed by it. How do you know if you've found this sweet spot? Well, you should also be amenable to change and not inflexible about your beliefs. I'm not going to start eating ice cream and bacon for every meal, start smoking and never work out again just to prove I don't have death anxiety. After all, I want to feel good, have energy, and be able to move my body even as I get older. In those ways, my desires for wellness is rooted in a love for life and not a fear of death. But when the extreme all or nothing voice pops up into my head, as it does with so many of us, saying that something isn't clean enough to put into my body, or imagining that if I just take this one supplement, my health will be amazing, I'll try to remember what that whisper contains: my own piece of the terror of death. So ask yourself, why do you live the way you do? For life or for death? Ow, I hit my funny bone. It's my funny bone, I hit it. A family member of mine died recently. I was close with him until I wasn't. Fortunately and unfortunately, he made a series of bad decisions that led him to become estranged from his friends and family in the last years of his life. So by the time he passed away, I no longer felt close with him because I no longer knew who he was. And based on his decisions, I'm not sure if I ever did. I wanted to feel sad, and I did a little bit, but I mostly just felt weird. I felt weird because he no longer existed, and I had only known a life where he existed, and now he didn't. But all of the memories were still there, and I can picture him, and there's a voice, but I can never see him or hear him in real life again. After watching his casket be placed in the ground, I was walking away with a rose in my hand from the ceremony, and out of nowhere, a bee circled around me and landed right on the rose and buried itself deep into the petals. It stayed there long enough that I had time to call my cousin over, and we both watched as it crawled out and flew away. So you're probably thinking, what does this have to do with anything? Well, to you, nothing. To me, it made chills run down my spine because I've had many such associations around deaths and bugs. I know it's weird, and I'm not saying that it's anything more than a coincidence, but sometimes things do feel too damn specific and magical to be dumb luck. The fact that I would grow up with a mother who had an experience with a butterfly that she associated with her grandparents so deeply that she got a tattoo of it. The fact that that bee could have landed on any number of roses that had been passed out to the attendees, and yet it landed on mine. The fact that only a few months later, a stunning dragonfly appeared in my car randomly when a family friend had recently died. A dragonfly that only flew into the car when we arrived at the place that this family friend had worked before their passing. I know this is all very woo-woo, and don't worry, the rest of the video will not be, but breaking down my relationship with death and religion, this feels like a key component. I grew up Orthodox Christian, a very strict fire and brimstone take on hell, mixed with a little impressionable girl with OCD was not a good combination for me. Religion made me fear life just as much as I feared death. Every moment I was alive felt like an opportunity to sin, and I was deathly afraid of going to hell for my intrusive thoughts. The way that each individual relates to religion in connection to death is going to be deeply personal, and I mean no offense to anyone's religion. As an adult, my understanding of the world is through a much more spiritual lens. Eastern religions like Buddhism and Taoism really resonate with me. I believe that when I die, I probably won't know I'm dead, so there's no fear or anything at all, but I find it comforting to remember what it felt like before I was born. It felt like nothing. I have no memories of it. it could safely be assumed that the non-being before our birth and after death are identical. Otherwise, I believe we may rejoin some collective consciousness, but I imagine that would be incredibly peaceful. But as a cynic of religion as a whole, the enduring truth that no one really knows is spooky, no matter what I believe is most likely. Religion for me is more of a guiding light on how to live my life, rather than a definitive answer on why we're here and where we'll be after we're gone. I like keeping my beliefs broad because while I do think that we're here for some reason and that we will be safe and at peace after we die, I also know I don't actually know and no one does, and I could be totally wrong. So for that reason, religion and spirituality will never be able to bring me complete peace of mind. In an effort to get a balanced take for this portion of the video, and in hopes to acquire some wisdom from others' perspectives on their mortality, I interviewed friends and family. I may not believe in their God, but maybe there are underlying mindsets that can be applied to my own relationship with death. Okay. Question number 1 is, what is your religion?
Orthodox Christian.
Okay.
I can't laugh.
No, you can't laugh through the thing you're saying.
Our body dies, but our soul does not. Our very being is alive after death, and we are waiting for the second coming and to be judged and, God willing, go to heaven. I'd say it brings me comfort. But if you start thinking about the sins you've committed all of your life, it can bring you anxiety because of the things that you've done. But no, it'll give you comfort knowing that you're going to be alive and God willing in heaven someday. I can't even imagine how the people before Christ lived. After Christ, you don't have to fear death anymore. I feel he is with us each individually.
Well, just now you said that it makes it so you don't have to fear death. But I do know when we talked on the phone the other day, you mentioned that there is still some fear there for you because there's that unknown.
Yeah, nobody's ever come back from the dead, so you don't really know what it's like. Mm-hmm. Hades was the place of the dead before Christ. Every soul there continually dying. Now, when you die, you're not dying. Your body's dying, but you, as a being, your thoughts, your very being is alive. So, in that respect, you don't have to fear death. Death is no more. The only thing I fear is being judged now for what I've done. He's going to be forgiving and merciful to us.
Then how come you still say that you harbor a bit of anxiety around your own judgment?
You have to learn how to forgive yourself. And I have not done that. And I should be able to do it. It's actually a sin to not forgive yourself because God has already forgiven you. So therefore, I should realize he's forgiven me and I should forgive myself. If I do not do that, and I have to work on this, if I do not do that, that means I don't have as much faith and trust in him as I should. And that's what I'm working on. And someday we're all going to be together, God willing, in heaven.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've spoken to my Father a few times and he has answered me. And good does come from bad. Mm-hmm. Things are not good at all in this world. It always was not good. But I think it's going to be worse. And I don't know how the young people today without God are going to survive it. Because I could not survive without him.
Amen.
Amen.
My religion is Hinduism, and this religion's beliefs on death are reincarnation, which is essentially tied into karma. The type of actions you do will lead you to either worse or better life. So if I do good deeds, I could probably reincarnate into a better life. But for me, my religion doesn't really bring like comfort around my death, nor anxiety. I mean, that's not why I believe in my religion. My religion is essentially a set of rules for me to follow on a day-to-day basis, rather than how will it affect my death or what will I reincarnate in my next life. I don't really think about religion in that manner. For me, it's just taking it one day at a time. I think it's more productive and more valuable to just focus on what I'm doing right now. In terms of how it's affecting my mourning process, I mean, you know, how can we keep this person in our memory and, make this person proud, or like, how can we make this, how can we move forward from this and make this person's memory proud? I think that's what's more valuable in the mourning process rather than the actual grief, which will eventually pass. Like I mentioned earlier, my religion is just a set of rules for me to follow and on a day-to-day basis, and how I should treat people on a day-to-day basis. It's not really nothing more. It's essentially, how do I carry myself? What action should I take as I live life, and how I should treat people on a day-to-day basis as I live life. And yeah, that's about it.
So I grew up in a non-denominational Christian upbringing, and it's basically just your typical Christian beliefs, but without a lot of the extra tradition. So while a lot of the times that's less strict than a lot of the other denominations in Christianity, I personally had a pretty tough time dealing with, any sort of guilt and punishment and that type of thing. And a lot of that comes from my OCD, and a lot of that comes from my parents really being quite strict on me growing up. And to be honest, I think that made me pretty scared of an afterlife and death and worrying about going to hell or not being good enough and being guilty of any little thing that could possibly fall into that category. And I noticed myself kind of disassociating from death. I think it helps me not think about it or worry about it too much if I don't have it on the forefront of my mind. And I think in some ways that's good. And it's let me not really worry too much about the idea of death or be scared too much because it's just not something that I think about. But in other ways, I think it's not the best thing because I am disassociated from it. And when I have stronger feelings about it, it really hits hard and it's scary. And even though I have a much better relationship in my walk as a Christian, it's still very scary sometimes to think about that. I think it's hard to break that cycle of being disengaged and disassociated from these scary thoughts when you've been doing it for most of your life. I think now I have a much better relationship with God. And for me, that's a much more personal relationship, and it's less about showing off like a Christian or being perfect. And it's more about understanding that there's someone who loves me and cares for me no matter what I do. And that's the belief that I cling to and hope to and trust in. But I would be lying if I said that death doesn't scare me still a little bit. And I've had issues with not feeling other people's deaths or passings as strongly as I feel like I should. I remember having both of my grandmothers pass away within 2 days of each other, and I don't even think I cried during that time period. And I think it's because part of me was not very close to them. It had been a long time since I had really seen or interacted or spoken with them, but I think part of me too just doesn't really associate with death. And I felt really bad about that for a long time, and I still do. And it's hard for me to connect with the idea or the feeling or the thought of death. I think I think to be honest, I've been very blessed to not have to deal with someone who's very close to me dying or moving on, passing away. I haven't had to deal with that yet, and I'm very blessed to be in that position. But I know that when it does happen, it's going to hit pretty hard because I'm not going to know how to react. I'm not going to know how to think. I don't know if I'll be super disassociated or super emotional, but I think I'll be able to get through it no matter what it is.
With all the awful things going on in the world right now, there's so much competing for our attention that processing your fears around mortality feels low on the priority list. Why worry about the hell that you may be going to when you're busy worrying about the hell that you're already in? But it's important to confront our demons. I have a family member in AA who said that people who go through the program are some of the happiest, freest people that they've ever met. And why would that be the case? Because they've confronted their demons. They can't be manipulated by their own brains to keep falling into the same traps that created their own personal hells to begin with. There's a devil and an angel on each of our shoulders. So let's listen to what the angel has to say for a bit. AKA me, I'm your angel. Please like this video. Rippling refers to leaving something from your life experience, some trait, some piece of wisdom, guidance, virtue, or comfort that passes on to others, known or unknown. This can and will happen even if you're not trying. Think about why you are who you are. I know there are many aspects of what makes me me that I have consciously and unconsciously inherited from others. There's music that I love from former high school friends whom I think of every time I hear it, even though we were never that close of friends. Clothing passed to me from friends and family, lending me a piece of their style choices and my overall preferred aesthetic. Words and phrases that I picked up on from being around people all the time who use them. And bits of wisdom from friends and family that have stuck with me so much that I refer to them in my video or repeat them to myself at the hard times in life. I am all of these things and I carry all of these lovely parts of these people with me. And when I express them to others through actions or words, on purpose or subconsciously, they affect others in ways I'll never know. But sometimes, in very special moments, you do get to know. Who has not experienced a glow upon learning that one has been directly or indirectly important to another? Every choice involves a relinquishment, and each relinquishment makes us aware of limitations and temporality. Every yes involves a no, and that narrowing of possibilities has a dark side. The more possibilities you close off, the smaller, shorter, and less visible your life appears. This was once defined as the impossibility of further possibility. But not making a decision won't stop time. The end will come someday, so all we can really do is try and make the right decision. Properly used, regret is a tool that can help take actions to prevent its further accumulation. How can you live without building new regrets? What do you have to change in your life? It's never too late, and you're never too old. Think about living your identical life again and again for all eternity. It can be jarring. It's a sobering thought experiment, leading you to consider seriously how you're really living. It increases your awareness that this life is your only life and should be lived well and fully, accumulating as few regrets as possible. What can you do in your life now so that in a year or 5 years, you won't look back and have similar regrets? Freud denied that death negates value or meaning. On the contrary, he exclaimed, an increase, limitation in the possibility of an enjoyment raises the value of the enjoyment. A flower that blossoms only for a single night does not seem to us on that account any less lovely. The value of all this beauty and perfection is determined only by the significance for our own emotional lives. It has no need to survive us. On this topic, I wrote in my journal, I feel when the time comes, I will be able to accept it and feel ready, as long as I spend every day soaking in what life has to offer and really enjoying being alive in this part of my life, enjoying the goals I've already achieved, basking in what I've brought to fruition, immersing myself in the beautiful memories I've already made, especially to make the rough times more enjoyable. Having goals to be excited about moving forward, but not pausing my happiness and enjoyment until I get them. Feeling inherently worthy to enjoy life right now, no matter what I have or have not accomplished. At its core, death is one big question mark. We can only guess what happens after the big irreversibility of existence. So what's so scary about this permanence? Just the lack of experience, therefore lack of understanding it. It's like when I used to hate change until I experienced it enough, and then I realized it's actively worth it, no matter how scary. I've changed to thank for all the beautiful, fulfilling parts of my life right now. So I guess the same could be true of permanence. It's scary and hard just like change, and it also makes things so much more meaningful. If people didn't die, I wouldn't value our relationships the same way. If I could always go back to my 20s or my childhood, they wouldn't feel special. It's the duality of man, the ever-present yin and yang of life. You cannot know one without knowing the other. You cannot know good without knowing bad. Death sucks and it's scary and at times seems unfair, but so is change. But it also makes life richer because it makes me acutely aware of how much the people and experiences in my life matter to me. Death feels like such a heavy, loaded word, when all it is one final but permanent change. I think framing it that way makes it less scary, and I also understand its necessity. I am grateful for death. And I thought that was the end of the video, until I started to become really anxious because I was thinking about death so much for this video, and I was becoming hyper aware of it. And awareness is good, but obsession is bad. If I spend my whole life stressing about enjoying the moment enough, counterintuitively, I'll spend that valuable time trying to be absorbed in and grateful for every moment instead of actually being absorbed in every moment. And don't get me wrong, there is definitely value in mindfulness, but for me, at least, I just can't overdo it. I had a dream the other night and it was really weird, and dreams can hold a lot of underlying meaning. So I was supposed to be at a school play that a friend had invited me to, and Donald Trump, stay with me, dropped off a bunch of free clothing, which he would never do, that's too liberal for him. And I spent the whole night digging through it, and it wasn't until it was too late that I realized I hadn't spent any time actually enjoying the play that I was supposed to be there for or seeing my friend. So if we break this down, I was at an important event that doesn't happen often to support someone I cared about. But instead of focusing on the important parts of the night, I was so wrapped up in the vain activity of digging through junk that I didn't need. And on top of that, the fact that Donald Trump himself was the one giving me this clothing speaks volumes. I was going against my moral code simply by engaging in this activity. It's ironic I made the choice I did in this dream, but the message is clear as day. By over-fixating on anything too much, be it death, my appearance, free clothing by the wrinkly orange hat man, I'm actively hurting my experience and enjoyment of life, going against what I claim are my morals and values of trying to enjoy life to the fullest. When I interviewed my grandma for this video, she said it wasn't good for someone my age to be thinking about death so much, and maybe she's right. The fear will always be there, but I don't always have to humor it. To have a nice time at that play with my friend, I don't have to dig through those clothes. I'm glad I've faced the depths of death, and I know I'll have to permanently face it one day, but for now, I don't need to constantly acknowledge it to feel fulfilled. The time will pass whether I'm worried about it passing too quickly or not. What better way to feel grateful for life than by enjoying it? What a concept. And I wanted to tie this video up in a really satisfying way that left me feeling like I had the answers to this reoccurring fear, but that's just entirely counterintuitive to the nature of this fear itself and what I've learned about death. Obviously, I won't run from the fear, and I couldn't if I tried, physically or psychologically, because as we've learned, if the fear is not properly acknowledged, it can affect our actions anyway, but I'm not going to engage with it all the time either. I'll face it when I have to, and try not to think about it when I don't have to, and that'll just have to be good enough.
And that's the end of my movie.
Okay.